Inside Stateville Prison, Illinois, America's overcrowded hell. For nearly a century, Stateville Prison has stood on the outskirts of Chicago like a fortress from another era. Thousands of men have passed through its gates. Some arrived terrified. Some arrived angry. Some arrived believing they were prepared for prison life. Most quickly discovered they were wrong. Because inside Stateville, survival has never depended solely on strength. It depends on understanding an environment built around control, isolation, and pressure. An environment where overcrowding pushed aging infrastructure beyond its limits. Where violence could erupt without warning. Where generations of inmates developed their own rules, their own hierarchies, and their own methods of survival. To the public, Stateville became known as one of America's most infamous prisons. But the reality inside these walls was often more complicated, and in many ways more disturbing, than anything reported outside. Because the true story of Stateville isn't found in statistics. It's found in the daily lives of the men trapped inside. And before this story ends, we'll see why many former inmates described parts of Stateville as a place designed to test the limits of human endurance. What happens deeper inside these walls is even harder to imagine. Before we go further, subscribe for more prison documentaries and leave a comment sharing where you're watching from. The prison that time forgot. To understand why Stateville earned such a notorious reputation, you have to go back to the beginning. Stateville Correctional Center opened in 1925 during a period when American prisons were being designed around ideas of strict discipline and constant observation. The facility quickly became recognizable because of one unique structure: the Roundhouse. Unlike traditional rectangular prisons, the Roundhouse was built using a circular design inspired by a concept known as the panopticon. From a central observation point, guards could theoretically observe hundreds of inmates at once. The idea was simple. If prisoners believed they could be watched at any moment, they would be more likely to follow rules. From above, the structure looked almost futuristic. From inside, many inmates described it differently. The architecture created an atmosphere that felt oppressive even by prison standards. Rows of cells stretched upward around a central hub. Voices echoed endlessly through concrete and steel. Privacy barely existed. The building itself seemed designed to remind prisoners that they were constantly under control. For decades, Stateville remained one of Illinois' most important correctional facilities. But as crime policies changed and prison populations increased across America, the institution began facing pressures its designers never anticipated. Sentences became longer. More offenders entered the system. Facilities filled beyond intended capacity. And little by little, Stateville transformed from a prison into something closer to a crowded city locked behind walls. By the late 20th century, many parts of the institution were showing their age. Paint peeled from walls. Pipes deteriorated. Infrastructure struggled to keep pace with growing inmate populations. Yet despite these problems, men continued arriving every day. The gates never stopped opening. And for every new arrival, the experience began with the same realization. Everything they understood about freedom was suddenly gone. What happened after crossing those gates would shape every day that followed. And for some inmates, those first hours became the most important of their entire sentence. Arrival into a different world. The journey to Stateville often begins long before an inmate sees the prison itself. Many arrive from county jails. Others transfer from different correctional facilities. Some spend hours chained inside transport buses moving through Illinois highways. Conversations during those trips tend to be quiet. Veteran prisoners understand what awaits. First-time offenders often sit silently, staring through reinforced windows. As the prison grows larger in the distance, uncertainty starts becoming reality. Eventually the bus enters secured grounds. Gates close behind it. Another gate opens ahead. The process repeats. Every movement reinforces a simple message. You are entering a world built around containment. After stepping off the bus, inmates begin intake procedures. Property is cataloged. Personal belongings disappear into storage. Clothing is exchanged. Photographs are taken. Records are reviewed. Medical evaluations begin. Hours can pass during processing. Sometimes longer. For new arrivals, the experience feels overwhelming. Everything familiar has been stripped away. Even simple decisions become controlled by institutional schedules. When to eat. When to move. When to sleep. When to speak. The transition can feel abrupt. Outside prison, people exercise thousands of small choices every day without noticing. Inside prison, those choices largely disappear. And while the official intake process is stressful, many inmates quickly learn another evaluation is taking place simultaneously. One conducted not by prison staff, but by other prisoners. Throughout intake and housing assignments, experienced inmates observe newcomers carefully. Who appears confident? Who looks frightened? Who understands prison culture? Who clearly does not? These observations matter because prison society operates according to rules outsiders rarely see. A person's reputation begins forming almost immediately, sometimes before they even reach their assigned housing unit. And once those impressions take hold, changing them can become extremely difficult. The prison may have official classifications, but inmates have classifications of their own. And those unofficial judgments often carry consequences no rulebook can explain. The deeper a prisoner moves into Stateville, the more important those unwritten rules become, especially inside the housing units where daily life unfolds. And this is where the true reality of Stateville begins to reveal itself. Living inside the overcrowded machine. One of the most common descriptions former inmates gave when discussing Stateville was simple. Crowded. Not crowded in the ordinary sense. Crowded in a way that affected nearly every aspect of life. Many housing units were originally designed decades earlier, during a time when prison populations were much smaller. As inmate numbers increased, available space became increasingly limited. Cells intended for one person often housed two. In some periods, inmates reported conditions that felt far beyond what the facility was originally designed to support. The consequences extended far beyond discomfort. Every shower served more people. Every meal required additional coordination. Every healthcare request entered a larger queue. Every correctional officer managed more inmates. Every dispute emerged within tighter living conditions. Imagine spending years inside a small room shared with another person. Not for a weekend. Not for a month. But for years. Imagine eating, sleeping, reading, exercising, and managing stress in that same confined space. Now imagine doing it while surrounded by hundreds or thousands of other men facing similar frustrations. This was the environment many inmates experienced. The lack of privacy became one of the most difficult adjustments. Conversations could be overheard. Arguments became public. Personal space practically disappeared. Even sleeping could become challenging. Noise traveled constantly through housing units. Doors slammed. Voices echoed. Announcements interrupted silence. For some prisoners, learning how to mentally detach from the surrounding environment became a survival skill. Without that ability, the pressure could become overwhelming. And pressure has consequences. Because when large numbers of people live under constant stress, tension begins accumulating. Not always visibly. Not always immediately. But steadily. Like steam building inside a sealed container. The question was never whether tension existed. The question was when it would surface. And nowhere was that tension more visible than during the daily routines that govern prison life. The routine that never stops. Inside Stateville, every day begins long before the outside world wakes up. The first sounds are often mechanical. Doors, locks, intercom announcements. The distant movement of officers beginning another shift. For inmates, these sounds eventually become part of the background. But during the first weeks of incarceration, they are impossible to ignore. Many prisoners describe their early mornings as moments when reality returns all over again. For a few brief seconds after waking up, there can be confusion. Then the concrete walls come into focus. The bars. The narrow cell. The prison. And the realization that another day inside Stateville has begun. Count procedures are among the most important parts of prison operations. Several times each day, officers verify the location of every inmate. No exceptions. No shortcuts. The prison must know exactly where every prisoner is at all times. During count, movement stops. Housing units become still. Prisoners wait quietly while officers perform their checks. It may sound routine, but these procedures form the backbone of prison security. Without them, the entire system would struggle to function. Once count clears, movement begins. Breakfast follows. Lines form. Doors open. Hundreds of inmates begin moving through controlled pathways designed to regulate every aspect of prison life. For someone on the outside, this schedule may appear repetitive. For prisoners, it becomes the structure around which their entire existence revolves. Every meal. Every recreation period. Every work assignment. Every visit. Everything happens according to a timetable created by someone else. This loss of control affects people differently. Some inmates resist it. Others adapt. The prisoners who survive prison psychologically often learn an important lesson. Fighting every aspect of the system is exhausting. Eventually many focus their energy elsewhere. Reading. Working. Exercising. Learning skills. Anything that creates purpose. Because purpose becomes valuable in places where freedom is absent. Without purpose, days begin blending together. Weeks become difficult to distinguish from months. Months become years. And time itself starts feeling different. Many former inmates describe prison time as moving in two directions simultaneously. Individual days feel endless. Entire years disappear surprisingly fast. That strange contradiction becomes one of incarceration's most unsettling realities. But while schedules create order on paper, another system operates beneath the surface. A system that cannot be found in official prison manuals. A system created by inmates themselves. And understanding that system often determines whether someone experiences relative stability or constant danger. The unwritten rules of survival. Every prison has written rules. Stateville also had unwritten ones. And many inmates quickly learned that violating the second category could be just as dangerous as violating the first. These rules were rarely explained directly. Instead, they were observed, learned, absorbed through experience. A new prisoner entering the population often faces a silent education. Nobody hands him a guidebook. Nobody provides a formal orientation. Instead, he watches. He studies how others behave. Who associates with whom. Where people sit. How conversations unfold. What topics are avoided. And slowly, he begins understanding the invisible social structure surrounding him. Respect occupies a central role in prison culture. Not necessarily respect in the traditional sense. More often, respect means avoiding behavior that creates unnecessary conflict. Looking at someone for too long. Interrupting another inmate's business. Touching property that doesn't belong to you. Spreading information. Making promises that cannot be fulfilled. Small mistakes can carry surprisingly large consequences. This environment creates constant awareness. Prisoners learn to pay attention to details. Who is nearby? What is being discussed? Which tensions are developing? What conflicts might be brewing beneath the surface? Many former inmates describe prison as a place where awareness becomes second nature. Not because everyone is constantly in danger, but because unpredictability exists. And unpredictability encourages caution. One argument can alter relationships throughout an entire housing unit. One misunderstanding can create problems lasting months. One careless decision can attract attention from people best avoided. The men who adapt successfully often follow a simple principle. Stay out of unnecessary trouble. It sounds straightforward. In practice, it can be remarkably difficult. Because prison is an environment where people with different backgrounds, personalities, histories, and loyalties are forced to live together. Conflict is inevitable. The challenge is avoiding becoming part of it. And nowhere is that challenge more visible than in one of the prison's most important social spaces. The recreation yard. Because the yard reveals realities many outsiders never see. The yard. The prison yard serves many purposes simultaneously. It is a place for exercise. A place for conversation. A place for temporary escape from crowded housing units. And perhaps most importantly, it is a place where prison society becomes visible. Inside housing units, interactions are restricted. Inside the yard, larger patterns emerge. Groups gather. Friendships develop. Information spreads. Reputations grow. For many inmates, yard time represents one of the few opportunities to experience something resembling freedom. The word freedom is relative, of course. The walls remain. The towers remain. The fences remain. But open space has psychological value. Even limited open space. Some prisoners spend their yard time walking endless laps. Hour after hour. Day after day. Others focus on exercise. Push-ups. Pull-ups. Weightlifting when equipment is available. Physical fitness serves multiple purposes inside prison. It improves health. It reduces stress. And sometimes it enhances personal confidence in an environment where vulnerability can be dangerous. Conversations unfold throughout the yard. Some are ordinary. Sports. Families. News. Life outside. Others are more serious. Disputes. Debts. Rumors. Conflicts. Officers monitoring the yard understand that social dynamics are constantly evolving. Most days pass quietly. Some do not. The yard has historically been one of the places where tensions can become visible. Because large populations inevitably create friction. What makes prison unique is that people cannot simply walk away from those tensions. The same individuals see each other every day. Week after week. Month after month. This reality changes the way conflicts develop. And it changes the way they are resolved. Some disagreements end through conversation. Others do not. Some continue quietly for long periods before reaching a breaking point. The challenge for inmates is identifying those dangers before they become unavoidable. Because once prison conflict reaches a certain stage, opportunities for peaceful resolution often become limited. And that reality has shaped life inside Stateville for generations. Yet the yard is not the most tense environment inside the prison. That distinction belongs somewhere else. A place every inmate visits daily. A place where hundreds of personalities converge in a confined space. The dining hall. And what happens there reveals just how fragile prison order can be. The dining hall. At first glance, a prison dining hall may seem unremarkable. Tables, food trays, serving lines, correctional officers standing watch. But beneath that ordinary appearance lies one of the most socially complex environments in the institution. Hundreds of inmates enter within a relatively short period of time. Different groups occupy the same space. Existing tensions travel with them. Unresolved disputes arrive with them. The potential for conflict exists even during routine meals. Many former prisoners describe the dining hall as a place requiring constant awareness. Where you sit matters. Who you sit with matters. Sometimes where you stand matters. These decisions communicate information whether an inmate intends them to or not. Most meals pass without incident. People eat, talk quietly, return to their assigned areas. But prison history contains countless examples of seemingly minor events escalating unexpectedly. A perceived insult, an accidental collision, a misunderstanding. Outside prison, these incidents often disappear within minutes. Inside prison, circumstances can be very different. Because prison culture places significant value on reputation. If someone believes his reputation has been challenged, he may respond in ways outsiders find difficult to understand. The result is an environment where tensions sometimes exist beneath calm surfaces. Officers recognize this reality. Experienced staff learn to read body language, observe interactions, identify warning signs. Many disturbances are prevented before they begin. Others happen too quickly. The challenge becomes maintaining order among large populations operating under considerable pressure. And pressure inside Stateville rarely came from one source. Overcrowding, long sentences, isolation from family, uncertainty about the future. All of these factors combine to create an atmosphere where emotions could become unpredictable. What made the situation even more complicated was the existence of prison power structures. Because official authority was only one form of authority inside Stateville, there were others. And understanding them was essential for survival. Stateville Prison has stood for generations as one of America's most recognizable correctional institutions. Behind these walls, thousands of men experienced a world defined by confinement, routine, and survival. Some left determined to rebuild their lives. Others spent decades inside. Some never walked free again. Its story is about more than a prison. It's about the realities of overcrowding, punishment, rehabilitation, and the human cost of incarceration. As the lights fade across the cell blocks and another count begins, the questions surrounding places like Stateville remain as relevant as ever. How should society punish crime? Can prisons truly rehabilitate? And where's the line between justice and suffering? Those questions continue long after the prison gates close. Thank you for watching.